week earlier than normal. So the time they come to what we do, we'll read them in December. Under the regular agenda, we have a special use permit. It's to consider a special use permit to allow a daycare facility in a residence zoned R1, and the address is 79 30th Avenue Southwest. This is for a special use permit to allow group daycare. This time I'd ask the party presenting, please feel free to come forward.
Good morning.
And at this time, I'd just ask you to give us your name and your address.
Betty Mules, 79 30th Avenue Southwest, Dickinson.
Okay. Thank you. And just let us know what your plans are.
Oh, well, I just stopped daycare in Montana here on October 12th and moved here to Dickinson, and have since been in a flurry trying to renovate the home that I'm in right now, tearing down walls and whatnot, getting it ready for a daycare. And I propose to start out with 6 and then eventually 12 children when my daughter-in-law will come in with me, and she'll be an employee, and we're going to propose to have a daycare. I have a few more things to do to the home before we take in 12 children, but the social worker, Emily, can't think of her last name, sorry, is going to be looking that over. In fact, she'll be coming probably tomorrow to approve or, look over the home to inspect it and see that it's met code and everything that it needs.
Thank you. In your dealings with opening a daycare in North Dakota, are there much difference between what you did in Montana and here?
The regulations are somewhat different, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And you proposed age 1 through to 12, not over 12 years old?
In the summer months, sometimes you will get a child that just needs some supervision, but no, I normally don't take them past 12.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
I had a question. On the hours of operation, so for conditional approval, it says 7 to 5, like 5 o'clock, so everybody's picked up. Do you see that as an issue as far as your...
I had the same hours in Sydney. I wouldn't think that there would be a problem, but, there are times when parents can't make it there, and things happen, and yes, I've been there an hour or two later sometimes. Not always. I mean, that's very rare.
Would you like to change those hours, thinking ahead that you may be there longer, many times, and so you aren't going to be in violation of the permit if issued?
We could change it to 6. We could change it to 6.
Mr. Colling, is that acceptable to see,
Yes, Mr. President, the conditions that you put on a special use permit are at your discretion, and there would be no problem with changing those hours.
Sure.
Yeah, Mr. President, Steve Josephson with the city planner. I don't have an objection to that either. I'll cover this later, but the conditions that we have were ones that we worked out, with the applicant. But if she thinks that 6 o'clock is, gives a little more flexibility, certainly I know, having had a young child and being delayed in traffic, I certainly know that that flexibility would be fine. I don't have any objection to it going to 6 o'clock.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions?
The only 2 comments I had is changing the hours from 7 to 7, which seems more reasonable, and the age from 0 to 12.
I think that's a good suggestion. Also, the broader aspect you can get with your hours, the better. It's just for you to be safe and to avoid complaints and to ensure that you don't even have to worry about that. And as far as 0 to 1 year old, are there any special requirements then that you would have to take care of a child, a newborn to a 1 year old?
Yes. In Sydney, when I had the family group home, I could have up to 6 children. However, when you have infants, you can only have up to 3. So it's, it limits the amount of children that you can have, because obviously a little baby is going to maybe take more of your attention, and when they're sick or not well, or, they're just more time consuming. And so, yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, but that's covered by a state regulation, right?
Yes, it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, it
Okay.
is.
Would that also, Mr. Chairman, would that also be due to the number of staff that you have available to you? Would you, if you had an extra staff person, would you be able to accommodate younger infants?
You would only, if you had 2 staff people, you'd only have to be able to take 6 babies.
Okay.
So,
Any other comments or questions?
Just a comment here.
Mr. Krieg?
Is you're stating two number of employees, one of them being you?
yes.
Okay.
Any other comments?
Yes.
Mr. Josephson?
Yes, and I just wanted to give a very brief summary. You have a staff report in front of you. As I said, we had worked with the applicant on the conditions. The thing about having a special use is, this is something that normally wouldn't be compatible in the area, because that's a residential area, it's complementary to it. And, with a special use, it's saying, well, this is complementary to it. If we put these conditions on here, it's not going to conflict with the neighborhood, and the location of where this would be is in the northern part of the neighborhood, near an intersection, so you won't have traffic going up and down all the way, and causing conflicts. And as I said, we've got, the conditions that are here are ones that we worked with the applicant on, and are meant to make this acceptable to the people in the area. Certainly changing the hours to 7 o'clock, if the applicant thinks that's probably best, because again, I know what can happen sometimes is, I don't have any issue with going to 7 to 7, knowing that. As I said, if this were in a different zoning district, like say a commercial district, which you can have a child care in, the need for these kinds of conditions of this sort may not be necessary. But when you have something in a residential area that essentially can function like a business, then you get these conditions on here to mitigate the impacts of that on the neighbors. But the applicant has been extremely cooperative, wants to get this going, and certainly we have a need in Dickinson for childcare. So as you can see from the staff report, we recommend approval, that you approve this and send this onto the city commission for action.
I have one question.
Yes, Ms. Knowles.
Is it, probable, I have had fathers that have needed daycare at 6 o'clock in the morning, only for a brief time till their shift changed and so forth. But, so then I would be in violation if I went from 7 to 7. And, okay, is it possible to change that to 6 in case there's one person that needs daycare at 6 o'clock in the morning?
My opinion is, I think it would be possible. I'd have to ask the rest of the commission what they think if it comes to a motion. Is a consensus here? Anyone objecting to 6 in the morning? It's better to put it in there, even if you only have to use it a few times than not.
I don't intend to use it.
Yeah, and I don't have any objection to that either.
Okay.
The consensus seems that would be fine, and that would be better for your interests. Any other questions or comments?
I guess I just
Krieg.
like a little bit of feedback on changing from 0 to, or from age 1 to 0. What is your thoughts on that?
The age, are you asking me, do I take newborn?
From changing your request from age 1 to 12 to 0 to 12?
Well, I don't have a problem with that. I have taken babies. I choose not to, and my reasoning is because I can't work as much with the older children, the 4- and 5-year-olds, when I have babies to take care of, because of, the time that is consumed with taking care of babies. Now, I'm not going to limit myself. I mean, if I get a baby in, occasionally, that's going to be fine. I don't have a problem with that. But I limit myself from 1 to 12 so that I can take more of the older children, because I like working with them and have more time to do it then.
So that would be a personal preference?
It's just a personal preference, yes.
I know there's a lot of families that have another baby and
Yes,
need that
yes.
after 3 or 4 months.
Yes.
Get them to age 1, so.
Right.
So you'd be okay with moving?
Yes, yes, I would be.
Okay, can we get some clarification on that, please? Okay, have you talked, when you've been talking to county staff, Steve Josephson, when you've been talking to county staff about your operation?
Yes.
Because they're the ones who are ultimately going to license this, right?
Right?
Okay, so how have you presented it to them in terms of what your operation is going to be? Because we had a conversation before, and you gave us these conditions, and they're starting to move a little bit.
Yes.
So we just need to get it down to what exactly, I understand that you want some flexibility.
Right.
But we
Well-
want to condition this so that this is something that meets whatever the state
Right.
and county requirements are.
Right. I understand that, and just due to the fact that, we never had any of these, regulations in Montana. I mean, we just opened a daycare and went from whatever hours we chose to. But, I don't have a problem with the 6 o'clock, just because the need for flexibility, if someone comes in and they have to be to work by a certain time, and they have to drop their child off by 6:15 or 6 o'clock, I don't have a problem with that. I think that's good to put in there, because I don't want to be in violation, obviously.
Oh,
So,
the only thing I was wondering about was the infant, that you would have enough staff there, you would be able to cover that, because it sounded like you had fewer children if you had infants.
That's
But if you
right.
want to have 12,
right.
then you need more staff, is that correct?
That's right. I would need, on the 7th child, I would have to pull in more staff.
Okay, so is it to your what would work better for you? Would it work better for you to leave the conditions as is, or to say infant to 12? What would work best for your operation?
Well, it would work best for my operation to say, 1 to 12. If you leave the 0 in there, then that allows me the flexibility to take that baby. If a mother needs 3 weeks off for whatever, for maternity leave or something, I can take that other baby. But if, I don't normally want to take babies.
Okay, all right, would that limit your operations if suddenly you took a child in? Say you had your 12, and then you took a child in, an infant in, would that limit your operations, what
Yes,
you'd be
it
able
would.
to do there? Okay.
Yes, it would.
All right, so I guess that's the question is, what works best for you?
Well, what works best is, from the 1 to 12.
Okay.
Do you realize, Ms. Knowles, if you go from 1 to 12 with the city special use permit, you will not be able to take an infant in.
That's right.
Born to 1.
And see,
Okay.
that's right. Okay, that's right. So I don't want to be in violation, so if it's, leave it open to the 0 to 12 so that I can take that child in, that occasional child that a mother is going to need some daycare for. I mean, it probably wouldn't be long-term. I don't really encourage that.
And that really has no effect on us. I don't think,
Right.
the consensus here, it really doesn't matter to us, but just so you're aware that if you have to meet some other
Right.
regulations that the state or the
Right.
county, requires, that you would realize you have to do
Right.
that. But as far as we're concerned, we would like to, I think, see you go from 0 to 12.
Right.
So you
go
can
ahead.
have the flexibility.
Right, thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, would we call that 0 to 12 or infant to 12?
12 and under.
Yeah, there you go. I like that. I like that. 12 and, how about 12 and, ages 12 and under?
12 and under covers it, yep.
Well, now, if we're going to really start getting picky here,
That sounds
it
good.
was 212, now it's 12 and under.
Yeah. Shall be,
Is that under 13?
I think we'll just call it, they're 12 all the way until they turn 13, so they get that whole year.
Okay. I think we get the point, and we hope we've
Under
helped
12.
accommodate your, what you're trying to do. Does anyone else have any comments or questions?
I just wanted to make certain, commissioners, that we've got these amended conditions correct, so that number 2 would be the age range of the children shall be 12 and under, and then the hours of operation shall be 6 a.m. to 7 p.m., Monday through Friday. Is that acceptable to you?
That, very much so, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This time I'd ask if there's anyone else in the public who'd like to make comment on this special use permit application. Please feel free to come forward. Any other comments from the commission? If being done, we'll close the public hearing, and I would ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the special use permit at 79 30th Avenue Southwest as depicted in the application materials, meeting the requirements of Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare, and including the 7 conditions recommended by staff, with the exception that the age will be changed to 12 and under, and the hours of operation to 6 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Is there a second?
Second.
A second by Mr. Hanson. Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried, recommended. Thank you very much, Mrs. Knopf. Second item on our agenda today is a rezone request. Is to consider a rezone from R3 and CC to a PUD, generally described as the east half of Section 33, Township 140 North, Range 96 West. This time I would ask the party presenting, please feel free to come forward.
Morning, gentlemen. Chairman and members of the commission, thank you for having me here today. It's a pleasure to be in Dickinson. Looks like I could be in a little trouble, though, if you're getting this picky this early in the morning.
Okay, sir.
You got a lot to pick on.
Your name and your address, please.
Michael Marlowe. I'm with Sawtooth Capital Partners. We have a few addresses, but the one we'll use today is 1015 South Harbor, like Boat Harbor Boulevard, Oxnard, OXNARD, California, 93035. Excuse me. I'd like to start off by thanking you very much for moving the meeting from the 21st to now. I can speak on probably a few behalfs that that's definitely worked out in many in our behalf. The project that we're presenting today, and it looks like we're covering items 2 and 3 here, is Oliver Commons, and as you can see, it's on 15th and Elks Drive here, and the rezone that we're looking at here is we're looking at doing 5 different lots here. So, you know, it's R3 and CC right now, and then we just want to, you know, generally make this, you know, all a planned unit development. It's a mixed-use commercial project. When we first came in and met with Mr. Corton, he said, well, what are you guys going to plan on doing with this property? He said, well, we're thinking about doing some residential condos, townhomes type thing there. And he said, well, that's really original. Why don't you get in line? And why don't you just kind of go away, find an architect, find some local architects, engineers, and try and come up with a different concept, something that'll, you know, benefit the city of Dickinson, that'll work here. Because I guess the overinflux of residential apartments just doesn't, especially wouldn't work for this parcel. So, I mean, it wouldn't be ideal, it wouldn't be the best use for it. So the concept that we're presenting is a light commercial, which would be this building here. Then we have a proposed restaurant pad here, and then we have some live-work units here. Now, I know that the live-work unit concept, I believe they don't have any in Dickinson, and I, you know, for the most part, from my experience up in Williston, Kildare, and so forth, that they don't have it there either. The live-work concept being that we'd have, you know, professionals, dentists, doctors, lawyers, whoever. I've talked to some life insurance people, said they'd love to have some space here because they only come in for a week, 2 weeks, a month possibly, and then, you know, go to wherever they live. And so we'd have, you know, downstairs working units in these buildings here. Right now, this unit here is proposed as a condo, but we're going to try and go for the flexibility of leaving that open to, you know, if the live-work concept really takes off, then, you know, we'll probably do the same here. So the live-work concept being that, you know, they have their office spaces down below and then their living quarters up above. So we believe that was going to be very beneficial to the city of Dickinson and to the people that want to, you know, come here and do business. And then, and so we have, it's basically going to be all a common area, shared parking, between these units, and then, there's the distance requirements for the parking and so forth, and, I've got our engineers and architects here that can address some of those issues. But, here's just some renderings of what the site and the buildings will generally look like. And we've been working, pretty closely with the city on this project, and, it seems like things are moving along pretty well in accordance with what, we're trying to accomplish and what the needs of the city of Dickinson are. As I said, I do have our engineers here, who is Highlands Engineering, and our architects was with Schutz Voss, the general contractor on this project. He usually wakes up at 4:35 in the morning. I'm not sure why he's not here right now, but he's got a couple other projects that he's working on in Dickinson, so maybe something happened on one of them. The time frame for this project is that we're currently working on pre-leasing this project. We have a website designed for it. My nephew, Oliver, is working on that as well, and we're going to be working on pre-leasing commitments starting, now. It's like I said, it's on the web, it's on the internet, and we'd like to put some signs, out here, billboard type things, saying that the project is coming, and we're planning on, if we get the pre-leasing commitments and so forth, planning on breaking ground on this in the spring of 2013. And like I said, from a lot of the meetings that I've had, driving anywhere, driving all around the region, and talking to folks, they're really, really excited and said, I've gotten a lot of business cards saying, give us a call when you guys really start getting this thing going, and we'd, love to talk to you about it. Anyways, with that, I'd like to pass any of your technical questions and so forth, and whatever I might not be able to answer for you onto my engineers and architects. And like I said, it just seems like we're kind of combining 2 and 3 here, and I'm just going to make one broad presentation to you right now instead of having to do this twice. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I'd ask if there's any questions or comments for Mr. Marlowe.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Mr. Graham.
I'm a little more interested in the time frame. You said breaking ground 2013 on how many of the units?
Well, we're going to try and set it up as a phased development. However, with, that question's been asked many times. If, the pre-leasing, works out, and we're, let's say, 70–80% leased out on these buildings, then we're going to, go from A to Z and try and get it done as quickly as possible. Are we going to be able to do, 5 buildings and some of the site improvements in that, let's say 4, 5, 6 month period? It's possible. If you build the shells of the buildings, then you can work on the interior during the winter months. So, it's a bit of an open-ended question, but it's our hope that we'd have the project built as quickly as possible, properly. That being because we're going to have to go out to some outside financing for this, some conventional loans through banks, and they're going to want to see, those leasing commitments. So our goal is to do this as quickly as possible, but we'll apply for the phased portion of it.
Thank you, Mr. Grimm.
Yeah, you said, so you said condos, and then you said leasing. Are you selling any of the units?
No, and I'm sorry, if you heard me say condos, that was our original concept, which is pretty much dead. And this building right here is and was slated for that, and we're going to leave that, in a bit of a void right now, and hopefully that will be also a live-work unit. So the condo concept isn't really on the table.
Are you saying you're going to own these, you're not going to sell these live-work units? They're for sale?
No, they're not for sale. We're going to lease them.
They're going to be leased also?
Yes.
Any other questions or comments at this time? So you would like to break ground in the spring of 2013?
That's correct. And I believe the time frame of that will work out, especially since we have the local professionals here I'm out here regularly, once a month, 1 week, 2 weeks a month, and I will be for the very foreseeable future. So I think the time frame on this, would be conducive to starting, when things have thawed out and we can start pouring, concrete and so forth and start, creating foundations.
So if your pre-lease, your financing, and everything goes fine, is what you would like to see in your groundbreaking, you would see no objection to putting a time frame on this as far as whether or not the rezone request would be?
No, as long as it's fairly reasonable, I wouldn't. And then if we can apply for, another 12-month extension, what kind of time frame would you be thinking? 24 months?
Well, I don't know what the commission thinks. I would like to see, if it's spring, it's spring. And that actually is, not that far away.
No. I would be comfortable, and my team, and we've talked about this before, we'd be fairly comfortable with 24 months, and then being able to apply for, let's say, a 12-month extension beyond that, just to, cover our bases. I don't want to, I've heard that there's a few projects around, and I understand your, concerns about this of just, that have sat. But this, again, being a very new concept and one that I think is going to be used, again, that's, it's hard to foresee the future, but, as long as the time frame is reasonable.
Commissioners, if I can just take a moment and look at our code, because I'm thinking I just want to check what the PUD requirements are, because I think let me see if there's a time frame in there or not. So, and I think, don't we have a copy of the municipal code over here by Matt?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Jackson?
I have the same concern, and I think we should attach some time limitation to the PUD approval, like we have done on some other projects recently. 24 months, I think, is fine. I think that's reasonable. It gives them a couple construction seasons, and
Sure.
I think that's very reasonable.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Elkin?
you talked about phasing this project in. What do you plan on starting with? Apparently, you have a...
Well, I'll tell you, the easiest to start with, because I'm not in the restaurant business, and I understand the needs of the city of wanting a restaurant, and we've talked to many people of what they would like to see here. The easiest to do would be to do the pad for the restaurant, and then that would be, who knows what that could be. That could be a build-to-suit. That could be, something that a restaurant would just take over, build themselves, whatever concept that they're doing. So, probably start with the restaurant and at least get the immediate needs of what people want here as another choice of an eatery establishment. And then, probably start, because we've already got some folks real interested in this light commercial building for leasing space. And then move to, the live-work concept. So at least we have the three, the restaurant pad, the light commercial, and the live-work building, all done. So I would imagine seeing it somewhat go in, let's say this direction, but get the three main concepts, up as quickly as possible.
Mr. President?
Yes, Mr.
I just wanted to quote from you from the ordinance, from the municipal code, and it's section 39.05.014, termination of the PUD project. If no substantial development has taken place in a planned unit development district for 1 year following approval of the district, the Planning and Zoning Commission shall reconsider the zoning of the property and may, on its own motion, initiate an application for rezoning the property. So the municipal code gives you that flexibility. If, say, nothing has happened with this in 1 year's time, then it can come back to the Planning and Zoning Commission and say, well, we can rezone this property back to what it was or to some other zoning district. So that already exists within the code.
Thank you,
Does that address the planning and zoning members' concerns, or?
I think it does. It gives us a legal description of, but what our desires are that, I think in reality, we're looking at something that we don't want to put something out there that's just going to be out there that the city engineers and the city planners have to deal with when they have thousands of other units sitting out there, and who's going to facilitate all that infrastructure?
Understood.
Well, it sounds to me like it does too, but I'm wondering why we've attached time limitations to other recent projects. You know, Mr. Coley?
For the other PUD projects,
Yes.
there were specific phasing regarding those projects the developers wanted to incorporate in. So we've allowed them to do that within the context of those planning unit development agreements. We could do that as well with this one. It's another tool that the city can use to ensure that development occurs in phases and does get completed.
Mr. Cole, you don't see any conflict as far as what time limit that is requested? Whether it's 12 months or 24 or 18 or 6?
No, there would not be a conflict. We would, in general, the plan unit development agreements that we've incorporated the phasing plans in have been completion plans, so that they have to have so much of a project completed by a certain date. The section that Mr. Josephson references there is for the entire project, so that some substantial completion of the entire project would have to be completed by the deadlines that are in code.
And that word is in that code, that substantial. Is there a definition of that?
There is, Mr. President. It's defined in case law as to what substantial completion or substantial progress is, and will be determined, I guess, on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions at this time?
I've got one. I'd just like to say what Mr. Jackson said, you know, the key term being a couple building seasons. You know, this is not going to be a shotgun development, that it's just going to go up as quickly as possible and we're going to, miss here and there. We want to do a quality project. So having that, you know, at least 24 months, I think is the right thing to do. So please work with us on that so we can build a quality project here and not something that has to go so fast that we're you know, missing, you know, things.
So let me just get some clarification. So you're saying that you're looking at this in terms of how many phases, one phase, or how many phases are you
ideally, as I mentioned before, to Mr. Jackson's question, ideally, it would be going in one phase.
in one phase? And you're looking at, what, 24 months to complete one phase?
Well, that's the whole project.
Oh, that's the whole...
When you say one phase, I'm like, you know, saying, all right, 5 buildings is one phase, and we'll try and complete that, you know, as quickly as possible, and then that's going to come down to, you know, our, you know, aggressive marketing strategies through the coming months.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Elkin?
I'm just wondering if 2 years is sufficient, Gene. You know, we've seen projects similar to this. They may have been R3, and we allowed up to 3 years. I see nothing wrong with having some latitude here. And I know I'd like to see this project completed as quickly as possible. For the most part, a lot of these developments come along, and they tend to flip them, and then they come back in for a rezone, and so it just tends to just complicate every situation. But I don't know what your feelings are. I know that we've had PUDs before us.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Tooze.
Mr. Marlowe. Understanding that it's going to take some time to do this, is this the same group that owns the Ramada, that has control over this property?
No.
Okay. So it's already been flipped from the Ramada group to this group? Because we've rezoned this property several times.
Right.
So I think the major question here is probably going to be controlled through the PUD, excuse me, if it's going to take him 2 or 3 seasons, all dependent on the weather.
Yeah.
And it's depending on when this man can get in the ground in the spring. So I think the time limit can be restricted through the zoning department moreover than us, because he doesn't know yet. And I don't think they're going to go through this trouble to flip the property. So
That's correct.
I think you're on the same page, but it's going to take some time.
Well, I agree, Tracy, that I think it could take up to 3 years.
do too. I mean, I brought up the time limit. I would like to see a start time and a finish time both. I mean, that's my concern. And I see right now you're at ground zero. You're looking for financing, you're looking for leasing, and you haven't dug a hole yet. And you want us to wait till spring, so
No, we haven't. But the financing, I've talked to many local banks around here, and they cannot wait to finance this project. So they're lining up. I was talking about a project in Kildare that I was trying to do, and they didn't want anything to do with that. But this project here in Dickinson, and we're going to try and go to local financing for that. The only other institution outside of here that I would go to would possibly be Wells Fargo. But, you know, they'll probably end up taking over the permanent financing anyways. But the initial construction loan financing probably will go through the local banks here. And we had 4 meetings with 4 different banks, you know, a month and a half ago. So our due diligence has been underway for quite a while.
okay, that's good to hear. Because I am concerned. I'd like to see a start time and a finish time both.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Krieg?
I'm on the same page with you. I'd like to see a start date. I feel that 24 months is fine. They always have an opportunity to come back in and extend that, as far as I know. So
Correct.
I think to push it out 36 months, I'd just soon let's push for 24, and if it can't be done, come back in and we'll look at it then. If there's good progress and everything else looks good, we'll move on, but that'd be...
Exactly, Mr. Krieg, that's right. If you see the progress, if you see the proof in the pudding, then, you know, it should be an easy, you know, process to go through
Right.
to continue it. I appreciate that.
But I agree, I'd like to see that start date too. I think we're more concerned about getting things going rather than sitting for a year here or two, and then we're back in extending it on, you know, on something that hasn't started for 18 months, so.
Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Jackson?
you know, maybe back up a little bit. I think it's a great project. I think it's something that the city should really be promoting. I think we should try to facilitate this project as much as we can. I think it'll be very, very good. I'm going to vote in favor of the project, no problem. The 2 years or 3 years, I don't know if I'd quibble too much. He's asking for 24 months, and that's probably where I'd land. But there are a couple of technical things that I passed on to the engineering department. The one that concerns me most, and it's a detail we don't have to discuss too much, but I can see a need for possibly a right turn lane where Elks Drive enters 15th. I don't know if we have the width in the street to do that right now. So that's just something that the engineering department should look at as part of the PUD process. And we have an opportunity here with this applicant owning both sides of the street, so we could widen the street if need be. There are a couple other things as well that we don't need to go into today, but I think it's a good project. I think we should approve it.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Any other comments at this time? Mr. Josephson?
Yes, Steve Josephson, with the City of Dickinson. We reviewed this project, and, you know, we actually sent this out to get some staff for different agencies to review it, and we got some comments back from engineering. And based upon the comments we got, we crafted the conditions that you have in front of you for the planned unit development. Some of them are standard. This is also going to involve, too, a preliminary plat, which is actually going to involve a replatting of an existing subdivision, Dakota Crossings. Anyway, as I said, we have a number of conditions. Am I hearing from the commission that you want to include a condition that would have a start date and a duration of the project? Is that what I'm hearing from you? Okay.
I think that's a consensus. That's what I could pass along from what I've heard. We'd like
Okay.
the start date, and I think the 24-month that was requested would be good.
Would that be 24 months from the time that city commission approves this?
I would say yes.
Okay.
Mr. Colding, does that sound correct? 24 from the time the commission approves it? Is that standard?
I believe that the way the code would work is that when they rezone it to a PUD, they'd have a year to start construction of the project, and then the end date is really at your discretion of where you would want to put that. You can put that from 24 months from the start of construction, or 24 months from today's date, or however you want to control that timeline. I imagine, with all of these things, the applicant can come in and request an extension or anything like that as well. So that option will be there at your discretion as well.
And I would ask for that in a motion if we continue on. That my feelings, and I'd like to hear from everybody else, consensus is if the 24 months from the start date.
From the
would be
start of
fine.
construction?
Yeah, right. That's a 2 years to complete the project from the time they start. If we put a start date in, they'd give them 2 years, and that would give at least 2 full building seasons. And we've dealt with this, the city engineer has dealt with this property some 3 years ago extensively already.
Okay.
That was, I believe it started 3 years ago. I'd have to go back in the records. But if we could put a start date on a 24-month completion date from that start date, that's a lot less time than what we've already dealt with this property starting 3-some years ago.
Now, I'll ask the applicant then, so you were contemplating starting construction in April of 2013?
In the spring of 2013, April, May, when it's first, feasible.
Okay, well, does April sound reasonable?
Now, when you talk about feasible, are you talking about
I like May.
financially feasible or,
No, environmentally feasible.
okay? There's no question about the finances.
Well, like I said, we've met with, many local banks, and they do want to finance this project. I don't have the money in my pocket yet.
Okay. I think we could pick a date, and if you had to go over there and drill a hole in April, through the ice, you could do that.
And of course, you realize too that you've also come in for a preliminary plat, and you'll need a final plat, and also to negotiate the final subdivision agreement with the city. So, and if you look at, commission members, if you look at the conditions of the preliminary plat, the final plat will reflect whatever is approved for the planned unit development. And it looks like also there'll probably be some negotiations between the city and the applicant before the final subdivision agreement comes before you in the city for approval.
Right. At this time, we've mixed a lot of things together here because we really are reviewing a rezone request. We're looking at a rezone request right now. And in this, we've talked about a lot of things. And it's going to a PUD. So I think as we get back to the subject of the rezone, and if in this PUD we desire a start and a stop date or a finish date, I think that will be a consensus that will come about. I'd like to hear everybody's opinion, but at this time, I'd ask if there's any more comments on the rezone request.
The only thing I would ask is just to make sure in that motion, so you're asking for the duration of the planned unit development to be 24 months, starting in April of 2013, from 2013, is that?
Well, that's my personal preference, and I'd like to hear a consensus from the commission when someone makes a motion. If it's in that motion, I would support that or whatever they come up with, because I think there's a lot of other thoughts here.
Mr. Chairman,
As time-wise.
could we make that 24 months based off the first approval of his building permit inside the PUD? Because whenever he comes in and gets entitled with that building permit, then it's 24 months from there, and then he could come in and extend it.
It sounds reasonable.
Well, the thing I would say to that is a certain date is easier to track.
Right now, if he's lucky enough to be on the December meeting, that puts him all the way till March. So he is not going to be entitled until March, even on getting the lots plotted. After that, if we put it on April, it's tight. I know the review process, what it takes to get a building permit. Nathan's shaking his head over there. So upon the approval of the building permit, it'd be 2 years after that.
Mr. Jackson?
I think I may be confused, but it sounds like our code says he has a year, the PUD is good for a year, so it sounds to me like he has a year to start construction, and why don't we just leave that and say 24 months following the beginning of construction?
I'm good with that thought. That sounds reasonable. Yeah, and like I said, I think everybody would support the consensus. Is that clear enough, Mr. Josephson, do you think, for the PUD?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we'll put that in there, and we'll reference that section in there, too.
Good. Any other comments or questions at this time? Mr. Marlowe?
Well, like I said, it sounds like you guys are willing to work with us, and the flexibility that you're going to be able to offer, is going to really help us out. And like I said, I'm just going to leave it with this, that we just want to do the right thing and do a quality project here in Dickinson. And, as we said, if we're under construction, we get a building or two going, then I don't see there's going to be any problem with you gentlemen of, getting things extended. And, nothing to say against the child care center, but if you could just put in there 15 and under, that'd be great. 2015 or 16 and under.
Thank you, Mr. Marlowe.
I think the message that you should be getting from us is that we want to see something happen.
That's what I'm getting, and I appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This time I'd ask if there's anyone else in the public who'd like to make comment on this rezone request, please feel free to come forward. Anyone else from the commission wish to make comment? Mr. Josephson?
I have nothing more to add. You've got my staff report, and, planning staff recommends approval subject to the conditions, and it sounds like it'll be revised, with the additional condition about, the project is limited to 24 months from the start of construction. And we'll reference in there the, we can also, we've got that section in here already about termination of the PUD so it sounds like the motion would be whoever makes it at 24 months from the start of construction will be the duration of the project, of the planned unit development.
Thank you. This time I'll close the public portion of this hearing and ask for a motion.
I'll try.
Mr. Tooze?
I'll make the motion to consider, or to approve, a rezone from R3 to CC to a PUD, with the following conditions that we discussed: to time limit at 24 months, and that's 24 months after the 1-year time frame that we discussed. Make sense?
Well, that wasn't my understanding.
Well, what's your understanding?
I have it 24 months from the start of construction.
Okay, start of construction.
I'll second that.
Fine.
Been a second. Is there any discussion?
I hate to pick on this, but,
Sure. Mr. Kovach?
but really, he has a year to start construction if he wanted to. So we really are talking roughly 3 years from the time of approval. So we could say all we want as far as time of construction, but that could be a year from now.
Correct.
Okay.
Any further discussion?
Do we have a second?
We have a
Okay,
second.
I'm sorry, Jay, you did.
I do have
early.
one question for Mr. Kovach. Is there any issue with Parks and Rec?
I believe we already decided to take cash in lieu.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. Any further discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Recommended rezone request. This time, item 3 on our regular agenda is a preliminary plat. It's a preliminary plat. It's to consider a preliminary plat for the Oliver Commons project. It's a PUD describing the east half of Section 33, Township 140 North, Range 96 West. This time I'd ask the party presenting the plat, please feel free to come forward.
Thank you, Commissioners. Andrew Schrank with Highlands Engineering and Surveying. This is a similar project that Mike Marl had just presented. As he had discussed, we're planning on splitting the existing Dakota Crossing subdivision into 5 lots. As shown by the white lines on the diagram there, each building would be in a separate lot. If you have any questions regarding this plot, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Is, any questions for Mr. Schenk?
Mr. President, I just wanted to, our staff recommendation is approval that there are, that that the following conditions be addressed by final plat approval. The final plat shall reflect the adopted Oliver Commons planned unit development, and also prior to adoption of the final plat, the final subdivision agreement shall be written in accordance with the adopted Oliver Commons planned unit development and shall be approved by the city after hearings before the Planning and Zoning Commission and the City Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Josephson. Anyone have any comments or questions on this preliminary plat? This time I'd ask if there's anyone in public who'd like to make comment on this plat. Please feel free to come forward. Being none, any other comments from the commission? Being none, we'll close the public portion of this, and I would ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move to approve the, I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning recommend approval of item number 3 as depicted in the applicable materials as meeting the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare.
Is there a second?
Second.
A second. Mr. Hanson? Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Preliminary plat recommended. Thank you very much, Mr. Shank. Anything else anyone would like to bring before the commission? This time we have, Mr. Josephson, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to discuss what you've got there. Well, one item I wanted to bring up was this Thursday at 5 o'clock over at the, what used to be the Badlands Activity Center, was it the Henry Bizet, is that how it's pronounced? Bijou Center, excuse me. We're going to have a public meeting to take public comment on the draft comprehensive plan, and that's at 5 o'clock. That's from 5 o'clock to 7:30. I would urge the members of the Planning and Zoning Commission to come and attend that, and make their comments and hear whatever presentation the consultants have have there. And then the other thing was, we included in your packet, it's the Vision West North Dakota Planning and Zoning Training Sessions, and these are going to be held here in Dickinson, same location, on December the 12th, 2012. There's no charge for that. And, from what I've seen of the program, it looks like it's a pretty broad coverage of planning practice and concept. No charge, lunch is included as part of it, and I'm attending myself. I'm urging the members of the County Zoning Board to attend it, too. I think it would be worthwhile for members of the Planning and Zoning Commission to attend that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Josephson. Is the training session that's going to be in Stanley, is it going to be the same?
It's the same thing. It's the same thing, so, so you can just go closer to home.
Right, if you have a chance to go to Stanley on Tuesday, the 20th?
Versus waiting until December the 12th.
Sure.
To not go, what is that, like a 2-hour drive or something?
4 hours. I was in Stanley just a few days ago, and the road isn't quite complete between here and Stanley.
I would think it's to everybody's benefit to wait a couple of weeks and and stay here. But yeah, I would recommend going to this.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? This time I'd ask a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
A motion, second? A second? All those in favor? Aye.